are here. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Lopes Goes Last podcast. I, of course, am your host, Tyler Lopes. If you have not subscribed yet, please feel free to do so. Also, hit that bell icon so you never miss any one of my videos. Also, please like and share this video so we can help the podcast grow. And please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Lopes Goes Last podcast on Facebook and at Lopes Goes Last on Twitter. So, it is the morning of, I believe, April 1st. So happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Saturday morning, and last night I wrapped up an interview with Max McCoig, longtime friend of the channel as well, one of the original supporters of the channel, and obviously he has stuck it out to today, and hopefully he will continue to stick it out with me in the future. But we had a fantastic conversation last night, you guys. You're going to have so much fun. I know for us, we had an absolute blast. We talked about it afterwards, and it just went so much better than I think either of us could have ever hoped for. We had such a great time. We talked about everything from, obviously, him being a Braves fan. So we talked about the Braves. We talked a little bit about the Red Sox. Talked about the World Baseball Classic. We talked about just a whole array of things. Our time at Johnson together. And again, it was just such a blast. I cannot wait for you guys to see it and hear it. Hopefully you guys have just as much fun as I do. And I did, I should say. And so I am not going to waste any more of your guys' time. Let's jump right in.
Max McCoig, how the heck are you, man? It's been forever. How you been?
Brother, I'm good. Living the dream. I think the last time we did this, we had just gotten pregnant, and now I have a 6-month-old. So
I
been
know.
doing
That
all
was
the
the
dad
first thing I was
things,
going to
and
say is congratulations. I haven't had a
thank
chance
you.
to do it on camera. Congrats, you're a first-time father. How are you holding up? Are you okay?
Yes, my wife is a hero and then some. She's a rock star, so she's been awesome. But it's been sweet. It's been sweet. Now we're rolling directly into Braves history and teaching my daughter about the Braves and how awesome Braves baseball is. So
Is
it's
she
been
doing
fun.
the tomahawk chop yet? Is she going,
Not
yeah,
yet, but she will
not yet.
be in Truist Park for her first time next weekend. So we're stoked about that.
That's awesome. That is freaking awesome. And again, I'm so happy for you. And
Thank you.
you're gonna be the best dad ever, man. You got a
Thank you,
great heart.
brother.
So I'm looking forward to kind of keeping up with that.
Yeah.
But obviously, for those of the people watching, as much as that's a really, really nice moment, they're here to talk baseball just like you and I
Of
are.
course.
So let's
Of
get right
course.
down to it. Obviously, we talked about it already. Braves guy. So let's jump right into Braves. How are you feeling going into the season? Obviously, at the time of recording, one or two games. I can't remember if the Braves already played today
One
or
game
not.
in. They're off today.
Okay, so they're off today. Perfect. So I know that there's just one game in, so it's tough to gauge off one game. But obviously, you had a whole off season to kind of digest everything that's been going on. How are you feeling going into this season as a Braves fan?
I feel good. Um, and I probably shouldn't. You know, I feel like when I'm like, oh, we may push the playoffs. We win the division, and then when I get real confident about the division, we don't make the playoffs at all. But I feel good watching them. Watched opening day, was really fun. Offense was electric. Max Fried getting hurt, game one was tough. You go into the season and you look at Max Fried, Strider, Kyle Wright, Charlie Morton, and then any one of a handful of young guys could take that fifth spot. So your rotation you feel great about. And then before the season starts, Kyle Wright hits the IL. After game one, it's looking like Max Fried is going to miss at least one start for sure, maybe even an IL stint. So it's when your opening day rotation looks as it did prior to the injuries, and now you're looking at three guys that were rotating in and out from AAA. It's a little bit tough, but the offense is fun. The offense is fun to watch. So I think their lineup matches up with anybody in the league. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that is fair. And I'll say as a Red Sox fan, that's just what my life is now. Is just watching AAA guys throw pretty much every day. That's
yeah,
pretty much my existence now. We have a AAA rotation going. I'll tell you, I texted. Obviously, you remember Kevin Ewing, who I need to freaking get on this podcast at some point.
yeah, you
Uh,
do.
and I texted him about maybe 2 weeks ago, and I said, dude, Corey Kluber's starting for us opening day. If this was 2016, I'd be freaking out right now. But, but obviously it's not. It's 2023. He's, 37 years old or whatever the heck he is, and he throws about 83 miles an hour. It's just not the same. So I do sympathize with having that many rotational injuries there to open up a season. But obviously, like you mentioned, the offense is looking on paper to be fantastic. And that's minus Dansby Swanson, who left this offseason. Were you somebody that was on board with him leaving, or were you one of the Braves fans that wanted him to stay? Because I feel like there were really two camps. He's overrated, he should go, we don't want to pay him, or we need to keep him.
So the answer is yes. Would I've loved Dansby Swanson to still be a Brave? Of course. Am I upset that we didn't pay him what he got? No, I don't necessarily think. And that the Braves don't do that. The Braves don't sign big long-term contracts for 30 plus guys, right? So when I saw the number that he got, I was like, oh, we may have dodged a bullet. I was always in the camp of if not Dansby, comma, then who? Question mark. And the fact that that answer ended up with Orlando Arcia, you look back and you're like, oh, so you'd much rather have Dansby Swanson than Orlando Arcia as your everyday starting shortstop. The fact that the two young guys, Braden Shoemake and Vaughn Grissom, didn't break camp, also disheartening because you're said to be, and I love Orlando Arcia. I think he's great. The Braves just signed him to a 3-year extension. I think he's done a lot of great things for this ball club and is amazing to plug in when a guy needs a day off. Get a DH game in there, give him starts. Like, I'm in no way saying don't give him starts. But to be your everyday guy, I was expecting somebody else, especially being in the championship window that the Braves are in. I felt like we could have done more and maybe should have, but I was always in the boat of it can be Vaughn Grissom as shortstop. Orlando Arcia is fine, but who's going to be in left? One of those holes has to be filled, right? And I think watching Eddie Rosario in spring training, and forgive me, listeners, Marcelo Zuna in spring training, watching those guys swing the bat kind of answered the left field question for me. Like, I'm okay with those guys in left right now. So that made it a little bit easier to accept Orlando Arcia as a starting shortstop. And we'll see. It could be Vaughn Grissom in a month. It could be Braden Shoemake in a month. But yeah, it wasn't as hard to see him walk away as it was Freddie.
Sure, yeah. And I think the tough thing about shortstop is definitely in both of our lifetimes, at least for me, it's evolved so much as a position and as, what is a valuable shortstop in today's game. It's so vastly different than what it used to be. And I think right now the tough part is we're at a spot where I don't know if there's necessarily a middle ground in terms of shortstops. I think you've got your guys that are paid a lot of money, that are really, really good, and then it's everyone else. I don't know if there's a middle ground right now, which is odd because I'm trying to think, like, I don't even think I'd feel comfortable saying like a guy like Tim Anderson is a mediocre shortstop with the way he swings the bat, or somebody who's, so elite on the base paths but can't hit the ball. Like, will you say that Adalberto Mondesi is a mediocre shortstop? I think he's not very good, quite frankly. He hasn't shown me anything. So, like, you can make arguments for individual players, but typically there's tiers, and there's nobody in the B tier. I think it's S tier, A tier, and C tier. Like, to me, there's no B tier shortstops going on right now. Do you kind of feel that same sentiment?
Yeah, I'm glad you clarified there's S, A, and then C, because guys like Dansby, Tim Anderson, Xander Bogaerts are not in the Trey Turner conversation.
Sure, of course, absolutely.
So yeah, I do think, but it's those kind of two groups that are neck and neck a little bit, with Trey Turner and those guys being clearly different. And then it's the drop off is steep, and not having one of those 5-ish guys was like disheartening. Bogarts goes to the Padres, and you're like, okay, if not Dansby, there's nobody left. So Correa, the battle between that, he lands back in Minnesota. Trey Turner, Philly, and then Xander goes to the Padres, and it's like, okay, Tim Anderson's under contract. You've got Adames obviously isn't getting traded. You've got Dansby or nobody, and then it ended up being nobody. So then it's now what? And the Braves will die on the hill of we're rolling with the young gun. We're rolling with the farm. We trust in the farm, whether that's using the farm to get the guy we want or the guy in the farm is the guy we're rolling with. So, and I think they are still in on Vaughn Grissom, and I love it. I'm not going to. There's a reason that I'm sitting on this podcast and I'm not the one signing Dansby Swanson. So, but yeah, I agree.
But it's so funny that you mentioned like, how when Dansby left, it's like, well, if not Dansby, then who? And kind of not, that feeling of, yeah, like I would have liked to have kept him, but for what he was paid, it didn't make sense. That is the exact same feeling that I have about Xander Bogaerts. So for me as a Red Sox fan, it was like, look, Xander Bogaerts debuted in the playoffs for us the year we won the World Series in 2013. He was 20 years old. He started games in that postseason when, who was our shortstop at that point? Oh my God, was it Steven Drew? I think it might have been Steven Drew who hit like 090 in the postseason. Like, but he would play third base and shortstop, he being Xander Bogaerts, because Steven Drew's glove was great, but the guy couldn't hit worth a lick during that postseason. So it was one of those things where, like, as a Red Sox fan, you instantly fell in love with the guy, and he's been nothing but a good player. He's never gotten in any kind of trouble. No one's ever had a crossword to say about him. He's been obviously a very good leader, and he deserves to have a big payday. For sure, he deserves to be paid a lot of money. But you look at a guy who's 30 years old, the direction where the Red Sox are going, we're not all in at this point. I've been look, you know me very well at this point. I'm not one of those Red Sox fans that thinks we're going to win the World Series every year, no matter how bad we are. I'm a very realistic Red Sox fan. And I said on my podcast, we're coming in last this year, guys. Deal with it. We're terrible. And that's that. We have no pitching. We have no depth. We have really nobody in our lineup outside of Rafael Devers that I believe in to be consistently very good this year.
Hey, Braves legend Adam Duvall.
I said consistently good this year. And I think Adam Duvall is pretty much the poster child of all or nothing in MLB. But with Xander, I saw what the Padres gave him, and I went, dude, he's 30. I'm not giving a 30-year-old a 10-year contract. I'm not doing it. You can't, like, the rumor was the Red Sox offered him more money per year, but they only offered him 6 years. And so he chose to go to San Diego, I'm sure for other reasons, obviously, other than money, but also because of the security of a longer contract. That's fine with me. People were mad at Shane Bloom for letting him go. I never was, because if he would have matched that or gone past it, I would be furious in 3 years. When he's going downhill and he can't play and he's still under contract for 7 years, like, I'm going to be angry. Like, the whole Red Sox nation is going to be ticked off because it's an untradeable contract, way too much money. The guy is not going to be playing as well as he was. Like, it just didn't make sense. So, like, I feel the exact same way you did. Like, I don't know if I would have given Dansby that contract if I were the Braves. But now, again, just like the Red Sox, you're in a position where who's playing that position? Who's going to fill those shoes? Not just as a shortstop, but as a leader and as a locker room guy and as a culture guy.
Yeah, that was it's hard to see anybody put on a different uniform when you've watched them. He was the last guy on the squad or on the Braves, not counting Charlie Morton, because Charlie Morton started his career in Atlanta, left and came back recently. But he was the last guy on the team that had played in that played at Turner Field. And it's like, oh, like there's no more of this. Like now Freddie's gone. You watch Dansby come up. All these guys are gone. And when you think about it that way, it's sad. Like Dansby's the ATL guy, the for the A, the all things loyal brand, like that is Dansby. And so the heartstrings get tugged at and it's hard. Like, and you're like, oh, I wish we would have given him that money. When you look at it from a business baseball standpoint, you're like, just as what you said about Xander, does good for Dansby. Go get your bag, go play in the same city that your wife plays professional soccer in. Also good on the Braves for not keeping their heartstrings in it too long because his name's Dansby Swanson. He's from Atlanta.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I obviously don't want to spend the whole this whole podcast talking about Dansby Swanson, but I do have to ask, now that it's over, now that the Dansby Swanson era in Atlanta is completely over at this point, is the Dansby Swanson trade the most swindle trade that's ever because look, I have said it a million times, maybe not necessarily on the podcast. I think I've talked about it once. I think Shelby Miller might be my least favorite baseball player that's ever lived. I don't know how he still has a job. I don't know how he's still in the minor leagues at this
He's
point.
still a minor league boss somewhere.
I think he's in the Dodgers organization somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know how he's still pitching, but the fact that you guys somehow convinced the Arizona Diamondbacks to give up the guy that like a month before they had drafted at number 1 overall for the guy who ended up becoming what Shelby Miller was, who was horrifying to watch pitch. I mean, it was just horrible. Like, is that the worst and or best trade in history outside of maybe Fernando Tatis straight up for James Shields?
That's one that comes to mind, obviously. But Braves wise, you look at that, and if you look at the context, Shelby Miller was an all-star at the time of the trade. So he was an all-star for the Braves that year, and then you send him for number 1 overall draft pick for a Diamondbacks team that's pushing a postseason. At the time, it made sense, but so quickly did it not make sense. And Ender Inciarte was the one. Like, you take Dansby out of it for a minute. Ender Inciarte was a part of that deal. Who was
Right.
3-time Gold Gloves for the Braves, was a part of that first couple division wins. And it's like Shelby Miller for Ender Inciarte alone looks like a fleece deal at the time. And then you add Dansby on top of it. You win a World Series. He's hit big home runs in game 5 of the World Series, game 4 of the World Series. And it's like, yeah, that's crazy. I think the one that comes to mind is the Dansby Swanson. And then on the other end of it is sending Adam Wainwright to St. Louis for JD Drew.
Right. Yeah. we don't talk about that in my
that one was tough.
Yeah, but also, I mean, that's not even the worst one. I know that there was a young first baseman. You might have heard of him. He was drafted by the Red Sox. His name was Beth Jagwell, something like that. Yeah, just gave him up for some closer that pitched like 6 games the Red Sox and left.
Yeah, that's tough.
What happened to Jeff Bagwell? Did he ever do anything? I don't think so.
Hall of Famer.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, guys. I know who Jeff Bagwell is. I'm just kidding. But no, that's one that comes to mind where, as a Red Sox fan, I'm like, like it just, because think about when Jeff Bagwell played, the Red Sox, you know, there's a thing that happened in 1986 that may not have happened if Jeff Bagwell's on that team. Maybe, I don't know.
Behind
Oh, was it the same position he played too? Oh, what a time to be alive. Anyway, so moving on to I want to talk, obviously, still kind of related to the Braves, but we'll talk about the division. I mean, obviously the East has just exploded. I think in both leagues. I think the AL East, a little less so this year than maybe last year or 2 years ago, but I think with the fact that the Rays are going to be pushing, you know, postseason every year, they're fantastic. The Yankees won almost 100 games. And we're all, I think, waiting for the Blue Jays to take that next step. I mean, I said on this podcast, I thought they were winning the World Series last year. I thought last year was that big step up year, and it just didn't happen. Injuries, trading for Jose Barrios just did not work. Not yet. He's still a couple years in his contract, but it just hasn't worked yet. Hyunjin Ryu blew out his arm. Like that rotation was destroyed, and that bullpen was never very good.
He got hurt, didn't he?
Sorry?
No, Kikuchi's in Seattle now. Never mind.
Yeah. Kikuchi. No, Kikuchi went from Seattle to Toronto, I think.
Okay. Yeah. But was hurt for the majority of the year.
Yes, exactly. So, that deep rotation that they had quickly fell by the wayside, and some of the young guys didn't really have as good a years as what I thought. But either way, it's the same thing in the NL East at this point. I mean, this year, the offseason was basically the NL East trying to outdo one another. And I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but compared to the Mets and the Phillies, the Braves just did not do nearly as much in terms of retooling, spending money, and that doesn't always necessarily lead to wins. We've seen it fail before, and we will see it fail again. Who knows? It might be this year that it fails. But as a Braves fan, watching all of these great players go from wherever they're coming from to the Mets and to the Phillies, who, yeah, they may have come in third in the division last year, but they still made it to the World Series. That's not a bad team over there. And so what kind of goes through your mind as a Braves fan? You know you won 100 games. You know you have a good team, but seeing those two teams get a lot better around you at the same time.
Yeah, a couple things. This is one of the things that I've talked about most in the offseason leading up to opening day, because watching it, my first instinct is like, what are we doing? We're so quiet, and we're going to do the same thing we do every year. Is we're going to sign that veteran pitcher to a 1-year deal for $20 million. Like, we're going to do that. Same thing's going to happen over and over again. And Yolis Chassin is going to be pitching come July. And I talked to a buddy of mine, and he said it to me like this. He said, everybody else in the East is chasing the Braves currently. For the past 5 years, it's been that. So the Braves don't have to match Steve Cohen so everybody's coming after the Braves until they have proven to do so. You can't get to the World Series until you make the playoffs. The easiest route to the World Series is winning your division. For the past 5 years, trade for Lindor. Go get Harper, go get Schwarber, these guys, and they haven't done it. So you think about that, and it's like, okay, yeah, not only do obviously we won 100 games last year, we have a good team, like you said, but it's for the past 5 years, nobody has proven to be better than you in the East. Why are we jumping to throw $300 million at Correa to climb to where? Was where I got to. It's like, where are we climbing to? Until somebody proves that they're a threat. Now, Mets, we won the division by a game. Sure. Still won the division. And then you think about the team in itself. You've got Spencer Strider started last year in single A. You have a full year of Spencer Strider. Kyle Wright came into his own last year. You get a full year of Kyle Wright. Ronald Acuna wasn't himself last year. Ronald Acuna is fully healthy this year. Ozzie Albies got hurt and missed a ton of games last year. I show you when Von Grissom got called up. Ozzie Albies is healthy this year. So now it's like, no, you didn't go make the move, but you didn't have Ozzie Albies for the postseason push. Now you do. Ronald Acuna wasn't fully Ronald Acuna last year. Now he is. So it's like the Braves didn't necessarily have to. And you could look back and we could miss the division by 3 games and you'd be like, if you would have brought Jansen back, if you would have signed someone, you could play the what if game all the time, but I don't necessarily think they had to do much. Could you? Yeah, the Sean Murphy thing was confusing with an all-star catcher already on the squad. But I mean, the Braves gave up next to nothing. A ton of people, guys that weren't playing in our system. And you get a top 5 catcher in the game. Some would say top 3. So
yeah.
You look at it and it's like, oh, Steve Cohen's spending $1 billion. Like, Wow, good for him. And that is great. And that's a threat. The Mets are a threat without Edwin Diaz. They are still very much a threat in the East. Do the Braves need to go jump and throw $400 million at somebody to match that? No. Michael Harris started the year in AA. Full year of Michael Harris.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that is a pretty mentally healthy way to look at it, because I guess maybe obviously the Red Sox have a different philosophy than the Braves. I think honestly, quite frankly, the complete polar opposite kind of strategy, because we don't give a rat's behind about homegrown talent, and we never have. It's always about making that splash free agent move for good or for bad. We've seen it work out fantastic, and we've seen it just be the worst thing you've ever seen.
Pablo Sandoval, baby.
I was gonna say you either you get prime Chris Sale, you can bring in JD Martinez at a lower price than what you would have got him, because for some reason no one wanted to sign free agents one year. Like there were like 8 all-star players that were just sitting there when spring training started one year for no reason at all. Or you could have Hanley Ramirez and Pablo Sandoval in the same offseason brought in, and it's awful. Or, possibly, let's think, Carl Crawford or something like that just is just horrible. And I just don't understand, that kind of logic. But I do think that for me, I would rather kind of have the approach of what you guys are having, where like you have basically done what anybody on MLB The Show doing any kind of rebuild would dream of doing. You have 25 or 26-year-olds that are two of the best players, not just at their position, but in baseball, on like $7 million a year for like 8 years. Like it's video game stuff. And that usually will allow you to then spend the money that really you should be using to pay those guys to get other guys that are, like a Charlie Morton, who is like, yeah, you're going to overpay by $3 to $5 million for Charlie Morton, but you can do that because Ronald Acuna is making $6 million right now. So yeah, it is definitely pretty a good, healthy way to think about that for sure. Especially coming from somebody that just basically my team just throws money at problems and goes, please just somebody have a positive WAR. I don't care.
Yeah, it's the buying out of arbitration years that seems to be Alex Anthopoulos' motto. He said, I'm going to overpay for what we could have gotten you in arbitration, in hopes that it ends up me being underpaying you for the 5 years after your arbitration. It's can be looked at as a risk. You look at now, Austin Riley's a little bit different. He got a hefty bag when we extended him. Sure. Michael Harris, though, you just bought him out of his arbitration, and he could, knock on wood, last year could have been the fluke. Spencer Strider bought him out of all of his arbitration, locked him up for a long time. I pray that this never happens to another Brave, but I show you Mike Soroka, who you didn't extend and is coming back. Please. Hopefully this year we'll pitch in AAA in a couple days. Great. But it is a risk, right? Which is also why these guys sign those deals, I think, is because I'm guaranteeing myself to not have to play myself up to free agency. Done. Set myself up for life. Done. Ozzie Albies talked about it, because that's him and Acuna's contracts are the ones that get the most slack. Under $100 million for 8 years, whatever the final numbers were. And Ozzie put it like this. He said, when I get my paycheck, and they're both overseas guys, right? When I get my paycheck, I'm sending so much of it home. He made comments about and I don't know the exact numbers of his like rookie ball and minor league contract, but he was like, we'd get a $500 check. And again, the numbers could be off here. I'd get a $500 check and 400 of it would go to Curacao. And so it's like when guys live like that, and when they live and their families don't have anything. Acuna, their families have nothing. It's like, why would you not sign the cheap deal to guarantee that you and your family are set up for the rest of your life? So it makes sense. And I get why other teams are like, oh, you fleeced them. You'd so like, I would be so mad if I was Austin Riley. I would be so mad if I was Ronald Acuna. I'd be so mad. It's like, why? Like, and I may be different because I've never been in a position to where I'm comparing myself money wise to the next best guy or the guy below me. But it's like once you get a certain number of millions, especially from overseas, set me and my family up for life. Check. Where do I sign?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's again, that's another really good way to look at it. And I think it's not talked about enough because, I think I think so much of society now is everything's documented, everything's Googleable, everything is like, common knowledge where like I know exactly, what statistics Carl Crawford had because he's on my mind because I'm mad
What a
about it
guy.
again. Yeah, right. Exactly.
What could have been?
Hey, this is how much Carl Crawford was paid, and look how terrible he was. And
Mhm.
Ronald Acuna is 800,000 times the player that Carl Crawford was, and he's making peanuts compared to that guy. It's ridiculous. The Braves hate Ronald Acuna. He should be mad. Like fair, like that's a fair argument because it is like, look, you could pay Ronald Acuna $40 million, and prime Ronald Acuna would be worth that money.
Oh,
But
yeah.
at the same time, it's not like you knocked Ronald Acuna unconscious and picked up his head and did an orbital scan that signed his contract for $5 million a year. And then he woke up and went, no, what am I going to do? Like, no, he looked at it. He talked with his family. He talked with his agent. He talked with whoever else he needed to talk with. And everybody unanimously decided this is what's best for our family. So, like, yeah, fair play to that. But yeah, it is just a very odd thing to think about because there's such two sides to it.
And I also think it's a great way to look at free agency. Like, I don't knock any part of it because exactly what you said, you could look at Rendon's contract and Riley or Devers could have said, all right, well, Rendon got this. Let's compare stats here. He's been hurt. He's not really been on the field. Am I not worth that to you? So I get both sides of it. I just don't, I don't get mad at either side either.
All right, so transitioning into the World Baseball Classic, obviously you and I, it's at least for me, it's one of my favorite parts about life. World Baseball Classic is just a special time of year, or 3 years, I guess. Whenever it rolls around, it's baseball at its purest form. I think it's beautiful in every way you could think about it. So what were your thoughts, kind of coming out of the World Baseball Classic? Because obviously we haven't had one since 2016 or 2017, excuse me.
17.
So, it's been a while. So, you may have forgotten about the magic of it all. So what kind of were your first thoughts and first reactions coming out of it?
Dude, it's almost like I cannot put into words how much I love the World Baseball Classic for so many reasons. I remember 2017, I lived in a duplex. We were still at Johnson and just having people come over and watch it. And we'd like grill hot dogs and just watch the USA play and cheer USA. But just to watch, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's similar to why people watch swimming when the Olympics comes around every 4 years because you don't when there's not the Olympics. But the fact that we watch baseball every year and now we get to do it on a countrywide like thing, it's I don't know what the beauty of it is. Watching it is beautiful to me. You think obviously cheering for the USA is great, but it's not even that for me. It's being able to. The best example is JT Realmuto. Um, for 162 games that I watch him play, I want him to strike out. I want him to fail. And I want his team to not win. I don't want him to get hurt, nothing like that. But he's one of the most electric players in baseball. He's hilarious with his attitude and some of the things that he says and does behind the plate. It's incredible. And for 7 games, I got to cheer as hard as I can for him. The best 2 players in baseball who play for the same team that may never get to play in a playoff game together. got to face each other in what, in my opinion, will be and I'm sure we'll talk about it, the greatest at bat that I've ever seen.
It's up there.
There's a reason that 97%, 98%, 96% of televisions in these countries were turned into the same game. It's electric. It's nothing. You can't beat it.
Yeah, and I've said it before on the podcast. I can't put into words, just like what you said. I cannot fathom or explain in a good way what makes the World Baseball Classic so special. I don't know what it is specifically. Obviously there's just the fans and how electric they are and how much they're invested in it. And I know that when I have been to other countries for baseball, there is a passion that we don't have in America because it's not necessarily that we take it for granted, because I don't think we do, but I think that there's over there, it's over in England where when I've played in England, it's not about money. It's not about skill even. It is about, I love this and I would not want to be doing anything else other than this right now. I don't care if I'm 55 and my wife is yelling at me that I'm doing this again instead of mowing the lawn, or I'm 12 years old and I just, my dad told me these stories about, Barry Bonds and Ken Griffey Jr. or all these players when I was growing up. And I need to know this game for myself. There's all of that all wrapped into one. And to see that, it's a beautiful thing. And that's just in England, where not like there's a ton of great British baseball players in the MLB right now. So it's not like the talent pool over there is unbelievable. And so when you see you see the fans for the other countries and everything like that, like there's also that element. But I think like what you talked about, there's just a magic about it. There's just something where you're not a fan of a team anymore. You're not like, I'm not a Red Sox fan. You're not a Braves fan. Like, we are just, yes, you're rooting for your country, but you just love baseball as a whole. And so does everybody on that field. And so do all the commentators. And so do all the fans. So do all the coaches. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. For sure, that Ohtani and Trout at bat. I mean, I'm trying to think of an at bat that I can come up with at the top of my head that
Gagne and Bonds, early 2000s.
Gagne and Bonds, yeah, when Bonds took him deep, yeah,
after like 10 pitches.
Yeah, that was
that one comes to mind, but that didn't have the hype coming into it. And granted, this one ended in a strikeout, not a home run, but the hype surrounding this at bat, everybody wanted this game to have this matchup, and it did. And it was a one-run game in the championship, 2 outs, 3-2 count. It's like, you can't beat it. And like when I think of the magic, and even like outside of that, at bat itself, you look at teams, Great Britain, Chinese Taipei, some of these teams, it's like, you get it. This is the biggest stage of baseball you have ever played on, you will ever play on. You're going to play with insane passion because it's all you got for the next 2 weeks. But then you see Trey Turner hit a go-ahead grand slam in a quarterfinal game, and 20 of his competitors for his normal 6-month day-to-day job are crowding him at home plate. 20 dudes that are $20 million, $30 million guys are jumping up and down because a guy that they play against for 162 games just put them ahead in a quarterfinal. You can't beat it. And then you turn to the last out of the whole thing, and it's two teammates for one at bat. Your best, my best. Let's go. 3-2 count, and Shohei wins that round. Maybe we'll see it round 2. I don't know.
I think, and I think that what made that at bat so special, for me anyway, is you're talking about the guys that may very well be, and I think are, as in like definite, the two very best baseball players that are walking planet Earth right now. Now, Mike Trout's been hurt. Mike Trout may not be the same as what he once was. But for me, if you become the king, you have to be dethroned for me to stop calling you that.
Yep.
And so I don't know if I think you've got to have somebody who has definitively said, yes, consistently, all the time, I am better than this guy. And I don't think anybody's done that except for Shohei Ohtani. I think he's the only one that right now you could say for the last handful of years, that guy might be the best player walking God's green earth right now. I mean, it's what Shohei has been able to do outside of his rookie year where he got hurt has been nothing short of historic and unprecedented. Because listen, you think about Babe Ruth. Guy could pitch and the guy could hit. Yeah, absolutely. Babe Ruth, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Was he throwing 100 miles an hour? And did he have the absolute filth of off-speed pitches that Shohei Ohtani has? The answer is no.
And he's also striking out with Shohei splitter.
Right. So, and people gave Adam Ottavino so much crap a couple years ago when he said, dude, if I'd faced Babe Ruth, I'd have struck him out. You know what? He probably would have. Like back at that time, nobody pitched like that. Like you got guys that are throwing 81 to 86 miles an hour. Is now what you're facing pretty much every day at the NCCAA level or at the Division III level, if not better than that at this point. I mean, it's just so I understand that point of view, but I think that at bat was so special because it was literally the two titans of baseball right now. And yes, they're on the same team, which again, I've said it on this channel before, ticks me off so bad that they're on the same team and they can't even make the dang playoffs. And it's not their fault. I'm not saying it is. It's everyone else's in that organization's fault. They need to figure it the heck out. They need to do something or I'm going to lose my mind. But just to watch those two go up against one another and you just know that they're thinking it. Like they're humble guys, so they're not going to talk about it in that way. But they're up there going, oh, so people are saying you're the best in the world. Well, I'm the best in the world. How about that? I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to hit I'm going to hit an absolute dinger off you. Tie this game, or it's going to go nuts. And Shohei's up there going, oh, really? No, it's my world now, pal. Like you just know that they're thinking it. You know it, and that's awesome.
It is. I do think. I love what you said about how. Because people have the Trout's hurt, he's not the best anymore. But until somebody takes it, it's still Trout's. And I love it because it's like somebody every given year is going to have better power numbers than Trout. Somebody may have a better average. Somebody may have better defense. Somebody may be faster. But those are four different guys. Trout is at the top, maybe not the very top, but he's near the top of all of those categories. So it's to find the next one guy who can do all of this. It's gonna, it'll be wild. And I mean, I think Shohei's in an unfair category until 20 more two-way guys come out. But he's the best baseball player pound for pound that we've ever seen.
I agree. And you know what's, and I know you and I have talked about this before, but I'm a big proponent of Barry Bonds. I think that if I'm taking one guy ever in history to start a team, I'm taking Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
But my God, Shohei Ohtani, I mean, if he keeps this up, he will be the best pound for pound baseball player we've ever seen. I think talent wise, certainly he's the best baseball player pound for pound we've ever seen. Yeah. Now it's a matter of getting the accolades and the longevity and the statistics to back it all up over a sustained career. And I know, I don't know if you're at all a basketball guy, but obviously on this channel, we talk basketball, football, and baseball. So to kind of bring a basketball example in to show at the very least a little consistency in my thought process. Who's been the king of basketball for the last 20 years?
LeBron James.
Exactly. So, and he's literally called the king. So this is a good example, obviously. So you have LeBron James. He's been on top for 15 years at this point, up to 2016. He comes back down 3-1, beats the Warriors. You sit there and you think, can LeBron keep this up? How long is he going to be able to stay on top of it? And I have always said, there will be guys that are better that become better at certain aspects of the game than LeBron James is. Obviously, Steph Curry's the best shooter we've ever seen. But is he a better overall player and totality of his entire game than LeBron James? No. Is Kevin Durant a better pure scorer than LeBron James? I believe so, at least in his prime without injuries and everything. But is he a better overall player than LeBron James in his prime? There's certainly an argument, but I think that there wasn't enough consistency there. Kevin Durant never led his own team to a championship. So there's all these different things. But then you've got a guy in Giannis who, yeah, he's not as good a shooter. Defensive player of the year, MVP, took a team to the finals, won the finals, all these different things. He's an absolute freak of, that's what they call him a Greek freak for a reason. He's a freak of nature. And he's done it consistently every single year. I would pick him. If there's a guy that I would say is another king of the NBA, it's him. Now, Jokic is now putting himself in that conversation.
But you're saying right now.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, like right this second. I'm not saying like better all time. No. I just mean like Shohei right now is not a better all-time player than Mike Trout, but he might be if he stays at this level for another 7 or 8 years.
I follow. Yeah.
But and it's the same thing for LeBron. Like LeBron is
40
either
plus.
I think at this point you just broke the scoring record. He's number 1 or he's number 2, or you're not at the table having this conversation. Like you don't deserve to be at the table at this point. Like it's Michael Jordan or it's LeBron James, and that's it. You can take your Wilt Chamberlain, you can take your Kareem, you can take your Kobe, rest in peace, but you can take all that, and that's not an argument anymore, because LeBron at this point, the statistics, the longevity, the fact that he's been at the top of the game of basketball for 20 years, at the level he has been, and also, yeah, you might not agree with everything that he does or says. The guy's never been in trouble with the law. He's never done drugs. He's never, like, yeah, he's had some teammates come out and say some not so great things about him, but so did Michael Jordan. Like, he has been about as good of an ambassador as you could possibly have for the game of basketball outside of what Jordan was. So, like, for me, it's the same thing with Shohei and Trout. Like, yes, Mike Trout has been the king of baseball. And until somebody completely, consistently dethrones him at just about every aspect of the game, he will be the king of baseball. And I think Shohei's in that conversation now. If he hasn't already overtaken it, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's, I mean, both of them are so fun to watch. And I love, like, it's hard for me to get in the Babe Ruth conversation because what you say is 100% correct. Babe Ruth never touching 100 miles an hour. Babe Ruth never throwing, like, he's not a pitcher in any level of professional baseball. But the talent of Babe Ruth in its time, at its core, imagine if you could copy paste both ways. It's like that's something we'll never get to see, which it would be so cool to see, like Babe Ruth with today's technology. And that's just it's almost too different of a game to compare, right? But the fact that Babe Ruth is, in my opinion, unarguably the most recognizable baseball name in the history of the sport.
Sure.
Yeah. And the fact that Shohei Ohtani, who's been in the league, he's 27, 26. However, he's been in the league 4 or 5 years. Is being categorized as the next, take out Babe Ruth's name, the next most recognizable name in baseball history.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And the fact that we get to watch his whole career is beautiful. Now, I want to see him pitch in the playoffs. That's another thing, going back to the WBC, why it was so great is because you never get to see these guys in the playoffs.
Right, exactly. And I don't know if you saw it, Max, but I did a video way back, probably, I mean, obviously last year, because it was I think it was either right before the All-Star break or right after, I can't remember, where I did a kind of retrospective on the Angels and the White Sox and where they were at and how they both were in the same position in their division, but the vibe was just so much different. Like the White Sox, it just felt like everything was going horribly wrong. Nothing was good. None of it made sense. And at the time I made the video, the Angels were like the hottest team in baseball. They were putting it together. And I was like, this is finally, they've made progress. And then literally like 2 days after I put the video out, they lost like 12 straight games, just completely collapsed. They're like fourth in their division, 5 games below 500 again. And I'm like, you know what? I don't like it. Like, this is getting to the point where I'm getting mad now. Like, how do you have, look, imagine it in football. Imagine if, and this is why the 49ers were so good back in the day, because they, honestly, at the time, they did have this. Imagine having the greatest quarterback and the greatest wide receiver of all time on your team at the same time. It would be like that. That's what's going on in the Angels right now. Imagine having the 2 best players in the world on your team at the same time. Not only do you not win at all, you don't even have a chance to get there. You've got, 3 teams within a 150-mile radius of your stadium that are better than you. And it's just crazy. It's crazy to think about for sure.
It is. And you'd like that you almost root for the Angels at this point. Like, you're a Red Sox fan, I'm a Braves fan through and through, but you almost every year you root for the Angels, like this to be the year. Like, I want to see them bring back 2002.
Right. Exactly. Yes. But yeah, and for me, like you said, I don't know if I necessarily root for the Angels per se, but if Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout were on the Pirates, I'd be rooting for the freaking Pirates. Like, I don't care. I'm just rooting for those guys to get their due, because I mean, what's it? Mike Trout's played in 1 postseason game, 4
his postseason statistics are like 0 for 3.
Whatever it is. It's like, dude, like, can you imagine if Mike Trout stays an Angel for his whole career, never plays in another playoff series, retires, and is still in the conversation of like, is this guy the best player we've ever seen? And his postseason average is 0.00. Like,
and he only has 3
appearance. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's a real chance of that happening.
Yeah. We deserve more as baseball fans. Figure it out, Angels.
That's the point. We're going to title this podcast "Angels Figure It the Frick Out." That's what we're going to title this episode. No, obviously not. But I do want to talk a little bit about obviously what happened in the World Baseball Classic outside of Shohei and Mike Trout and all the wonderful games. And it is, and I almost don't want to talk about it, but I feel like I kind of have to, because I want to get your thoughts. Because there's 2 camps on it, right? And I think based on your tweets, I know what camp you're in here. Edwin Diaz blows out his knee. I mean, obviously he's a Mets pitcher, so as bad as you feel as a Braves fan, maybe there's just that little tiny part in your mind where you're like, I don't have to deal with that guy. So like that's cool, I guess. But obviously you don't ever wish injury upon anybody. But he's celebrating a big win, and it's kind of hard to see in the video exactly what happened. If somebody stepped on him, or if he just landed wrong, or stepped on somebody's foot, or it's kind of hard to tell, because really you just saw a pile of bodies jumping and then a pile of bodies crying within like 2 frames. So it was very odd, but obviously he blows out his patella tendon, which, I mean, at least for me as somebody who's watched football, where that's a more common injury for my whole life, that could be a 2-year process. I mean, not a lot of people are talking about that right now, and I don't know. Obviously, football is a different sport. It's a lot more quick, like quick moving, especially for like a wide receiver or running back or something like that. But it could honestly end his career, and people are not talking about that, and I hope it doesn't. Mm-hmm. But what are your thoughts with the idea that people are saying, hey, this is why we shouldn't be having stuff like the World Baseball Classic, because these injuries could happen and the teams have no control? Like, I think I know what camp you're in, and I'm sure you know what camp I'm in. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, obviously up front, you never, like, as a Braves fan, like, you, in the back of the mind, it's like, oh, 2-1 games might be a little easier to come back from now. Of like, yeah, sure. But at what cost? You want, like, as a competitor, like, I want the Braves to beat the Mets at their best, because I don't want the 2021 season you get, but if Verlander was there, but if McCullers was there, I don't want that. Like, I don't want there to be any conversation of, but the Mets didn't have this guy. All teams have injuries, and you could what if for hours. But it is tough, and I hate it because the best closer in the game, you want to see him compete, not against the Braves. You want to see him give up home runs to the Braves. Sure, still fun to watch him pitch. Second greatest entrance in all of baseball for history. And the other one is for another team that I don't like, and it's Mariano Rivera. It's great. These guys can still be fun to watch and me root against them. Anyways, the thought and the concept that the WBC shouldn't happen, which is argument A, or argument B, do the WBC in November. One, debunk that. You do it in November, guys have already thrown hundreds and hundreds of innings. You think that that's going to be any safer on their arm than doing it in spring training? No. So don't do that. And also, Gavin Lux, horrible freak. You slide into second base. Cool. A guy who didn't play in the WBC, Reese Hoskins, was running to field a ball, jumped, and the same-ish injury. I think Edwin's was MCL and Reese's is his ACL. But it's like you didn't want this to happen. Mariano Rivera was shagging fly balls and tore his ACL. Like, it's things you do every day. And then the argument that, I'll be honest, as a Braves fan, it's fun for me to bite at people on Twitter when Mets fans are mad about the WBC. Granted, if this happened to Ronald Acuna, I cannot say that I wouldn't be acting as the Mets fans are. I don't know. But you hate it all the same. You don't celebrate in spring training. One team did, and that one team is the New York Mets, who Edwin Diaz plays for. So yeah, it's like they were jumping up and down and celebrating. That's funny, huh? But you don't predict these things. You don't ever wish for them to happen. But it's not in any way the fault of the WBC. It is a fluke injury. And I'm a big Twitter guy. You know that. You follow me on Twitter. I follow you on Twitter. You see my tweets. There was a doctor that came out and posted this video of like how his MCL, whatever tore, how it tore. And he came out and said there's no way that there wasn't a prior issue. The way he was jumping up and down, whether there was weight on him, whether he tripped, whether there's no way that was what tore it like it did. So yeah, obviously I'm in the camp and you can't blame the WBC. There's no change that needs to happen to the WBC because you saw two other guys with the same injury do it in spring training. You've seen, and I bring up Mariano Rivera, who tore his ACL shagging a fly ball, something you do without thought every day. And as much as it sucks, you've got to put the blame somewhere. And if I was mad, I would throw the blame somewhere too. But it's not there. It doesn't make sense to blame the WBC. I will say, my heart goes out to Alexis Diaz more than anybody else. Again, you saw there was one clip and then it broke to another clip of people crying. You can't really see what happens, but you see Alexis hugging his brother, bigger guy, putting his arms around him. And then you see Alexis bawling his eyes out as if it's his fault. Nobody feels worse than him. And God, I want Alexis Diaz to strike out 400 people this year.
Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, certainly. And I'm glad I was able to ask you this because I'm in the same boat you are. I think that blaming the WBC for stuff like this is ridiculous. Baseball, I mean, obviously you and I played, and at least I think you seemingly walked away from it by the end pretty unscathed in terms of permanent damage. I unfortunately haven't, but it's one of those things where you play it and you understand that the stuff that you're doing, especially you and I as pitchers, it's not natural, it's not anatomically correct, it's not something that you should be doing for 20 or 30 or 40 or however many years you do it. Like it's just not scientifically backed with any kind of good stuff. Like there's just not a lot of good comes out of throwing baseballs the way we throw them for extended periods of time. In fact, no good, quite frankly, comes out of that. Now, you might have, the stories like Craig Kimbrell where he, in college he broke his foot or something, or in high school he broke his foot, and then he couldn't throw from his standing position, so he had to start throwing from a kneeling position, and his arm got so strong that he's like, oh, I might actually make it, and now the guy's made hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, yeah, you might have that every once in a while, but vast majority of the time, you break your foot, you start throwing long toss from your knees, your elbow's gonna pop out and fly to Wyoming. Like it's so the fact that we blame a specific tournament or a specific event for baseball injuries, it just doesn't make sense to me. And you hear the players talking about it. Like I know if the WBC was canceled tomorrow, I think players would go on strike. Like players would players would not be okay if the WBC went on strike. There's players, I don't remember who said it. It was one of the American players, I believe, and they said something along the lines of like the WBC means in a lot of ways more to us than our jobs, than playing actual Major League Baseball. And I can't remember
the overseas guys for sure.
So it's like it means more to us than the job that we have and making money doing this, because it's about the love of the game and it's about pride and it's about country. But yeah, I completely wholeheartedly agree. The WBC to me is the best thing about baseball, and the fact that people are using Edwin as like a scapegoat to get rid of it, I think that shows a bigger problem than injuries in some kind of tournament.
Yeah, and it doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me, because the argument is make baseball bigger, make it more fun to watch. So we had these rules, and we also, the rules, just a side note, the Yankees game was super quick, 2:28 opening day, I think, something around there. The Braves game, 3:30 something. It averaged longer than normal. So like the rules haven't done much. Fun to watch, more stolen bases, great. Anyways, the arguments on the WBC and oh, you shouldn't do it. Is this not the baseball you want to watch? Is this not what you hope to watch for 162 games? The electricity, the people popping out of the dugout in the first inning, the unique and maybe over the top, but who cares, celebrations at home plate, Venezuela. It's like those are the moments that you wait 6 months to see in October, right? Those are those moments that you're like, oh my gosh, this mid-July, mid-August, like dog day game that nobody's at is so brutal to watch. You're wishing that it was this atmosphere of the WBC. So I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me, because that's the baseball that everybody's hoping for. And it's a glimpse. It's short and sweet, and it's 2 weeks. But that's the baseball you want to see for 162, right?
Absolutely. So transitioning into kind of what I've been really wanting to pick your brain about for this upcoming season. I know you and I have had conversations about it previously off camera, but I did a video a while back talking about predictions of who would win the division, who would win awards for this upcoming year. Obviously, I don't want to spend 45 minutes going through every single award and every single division, but I am curious as to kind of where you stand on certain awards and certain divisions that I think might be pretty close, including your own. So, and I know, Braves fan, you're going to say Braves, but try and be as objective as possible on that one. But we'll start with one that's a little bit, you can kind of say who you want. Who do you have taking home AL Cy Young this year?
AL Cy Young is a fun one. There's 3 guys. 2 of them, I think, one, as much as I don't like the Yankees, I do think Garrett Cole, in a year, it's like his name's in the conversation. Shane McClanahan, my dog, lefty, love him, think he will eventually get one. Your 2023 American League Cy Young is Dylan Cease of the Chicago White Sox.
Wow. You know what's interesting? You can make the argument, not only is he not the best pitcher in the AL, people will make the argument that he is the 3rd best pitcher on his team with Lance Lynn and Lucas Giolito. So that is definitely a not out of left field prediction because I could see it. I'm right there with you. Like I think he's got a ton of talent. He certainly could win it, but I think that is not at all what I was expecting. That is a very interesting pick for sure.
I love it. I love it. I think he's so much fun to watch pitch, and especially last year, I think he is in my mind, he's the one to win. There's easier picks, which would be fine. You could say even the first two guys I named are like great picks and could even be like safer picks. But Dylan Cease is the one that I'm watching this year.
There you go. There you go. Are we getting a repeat of Sandy Alcantara?
No. I do think Sandy Alcantara is in the top three. Your 2023 National League Cy Young is Corbin Burns. I think, and game one, I said this before the season started, and I'm going to stick to my guns. Game one did not look great, but the revenge tour, lost in arbitration and not getting extended, I won out. That Corbin Burns is going to pop out, and it's going to be fun to watch.
I love that pick. He was definitely one, him and Brandon Woodruff, quite frankly. Both where I'm like, oh, I could see it. I could see a Brewer taking it home this year for sure. Okay. Moving on. I've got to know, are the White Sox going to come back in the Central, or are you sticking with the Guardians, or is somebody else going to win that division this year?
It's one of those two teams, but I think I'm sticking with Cleveland. I think that's a very close race. And I think it comes down to, again, because if I'm not mistaken, last year it was division or no playoffs. The second place team was not in wild card contention, right? Because you had the Rays and the Mariners. And then who was the third AL wild card?
So the Blue Jays would have been.
Blue Jays, that's right. Because both Centrals, AL and NL, only had one team.
So right, yeah.
Wasn't a fallback on the wild card.
Teams go to the playoffs.
Yes. So I think it comes down to the same thing, maybe with different teams making the playoffs, but I do think the Central being as weak as it is comes down to White Sox or Guardians, and the other one not making the playoffs at all. And I think it's going to stick with Cleveland.
Yeah, fair play. And I think that, I picked the White Sox, and the reason I did was because last year was a complete dumpster fire for them. And I think that to say that that's going to happen again, I mean, I would be heartbroken if that happened again. And I'm not even a White Sox fan. I would just look at that and go, man, how can you have that bad of luck for 2 straight years? I mean, that would just be catastrophic because they lost Giolito. And even when Giolito was pitching, he was awful. Lance Lynn, they lost for most of the year. Dylan Cease was pretty good. But other than that, they had nobody in the rotation that was really pulling any kind of weight whatsoever. So their rotation was completely shot. Their bullpen, they traded for some guys, but most of them underperformed. Their offense was, they almost reminded me of the Mets in 2020 during the COVID year, where they were really good. Like you would look, not really good, but like you looked at their averages and their statistics, and they weren't too bad, but their clutch numbers were horrible. I mean, they could not hit with runners in scoring position. They just could not get the job done in clutch time. They lost a lot of close games. I know that they were, at one point, they were, I think, 10 games below 500 and had a run differential of like -6. Like they were just like, they were losing so many close games. They just couldn't pull it in. So it's one of those things where like, man, if you have that bad of luck 2 years in a row, I'd be shocked. And this might be controversial, maybe just because I don't know a whole lot about. I don't love the Guardians all that much. I don't think they have a ton. Like, their rotation is Shane Bieber, who is coming off of injury and whose velo's been down for 2 straight years, who's clearly their ace, and he deserves it because he's phenomenal. But then after that, I think it's really, Tristan McKenzie, who's young and fine. But other than that, it's a bunch of question marks after that. Zach Plesac, Kyle Quantrill, like, I just don't see anybody that really makes me go, ooh, like if you gave me that pitching rotation and then gave me the White Sox pitching rotation, I'm taking the White Sox pitching rotation. I'm taking the White Sox bullpen at their best, even well, maybe not without Liam Hendricks, but like because Emmanuel Clase, huh?
Best closer in baseball is in Cleveland.
Right. So yeah, for sure. I'm saying maybe not without Liam Hendricks. I wouldn't take just depth wise, but like I don't know. I think I would take I take the White Sox offense too over Cleveland's lineup because I mean yeah you got Jose Ramirez, but outside of that I mean there's not a lot of big name world beaters that are going to be killing you over there in Cleveland. So for me, I just think talent wise Chicago has it, but last year I mean you can clearly see what happens when it all goes downhill for the White Sox, and I certainly could see it happening again, but I just don't think it will.
I think that's I mean, that's going to be, which is weird because it's like, it is a weak division, but I think that may be one of the most fun races to watch.
Yeah.
And the new schedule is interesting because it's not, you play your division 20 games a year. You're playing everybody the same amount. So it's like the schedule is, everybody's like evened up, like strength of schedule wise. So it's going to be fun. That race will be a lot of fun, but I'm taking Cleveland.
And that's fair. And you know what? I definitely could see Cleveland doing it. They obviously, I think they got better this offseason. And obviously they won the division last year. So certainly that's not a bad take at all. Last one I want to talk about. I know that I think we had the most extended conversation about this, you and I. I picked Ronald Acuna to win MVP this year in the NL. Mm-hmm. Do you even just not subjectively as a Braves fan, do you share that sentiment, or is there somebody else that you're on the lookout for?
Yeah, I think I mean, go back to what I view as Acuna's last healthy season-ish on a baseball field, and it was the first half of 2021 before he got hurt. MVP,
he was on base.
Yeah. He was the guy, and it was very early before the All-Star break, so it's like, who's really the front runner, you know? But if there was a front runner, it was Ronald Acuna. You look now and you add in this 2 pickoff minimum or 2 pickoff max rule. 40-40 is not that far of a stretch anymore. Got to stay healthy, got to hit like you can, all the things. So yeah, I mean, Ronald Acuna I think has as good a chance as anybody. I do think that is the homer pick for me, and I can't deny that. Obviously, it'll always be. I'm always going to side with the Braves. I think Riley is another one. That's getting really, really homer pick. But Austin Riley, I think, will win an MVP sooner rather than later. But my fun pick for National League MVP is going to be Trey Turner.
Yeah, I can see it.
And he's a Braves killer. Him going to the Dodgers was this like awesome. I don't care that the Nationals are bad. The Braves don't have to face him 20 games a year. But then it was like, oh, no, you got to worry about him in the postseason because he kills the Braves. And now he's in one of the biggest competitions in the NL East. So, yeah, I just think Trey Turner I love him. Another reason why I love the WBC is because I get to cheer for Trey Turner. But Trey Turner, NL MVP.
Fair enough. I love that. And I definitely could see that. For me, I think in my past, I've been that guy that like when a big time player for any of the sports that I watch signs with a new team, my first thought is if it's a better situation or if that team is really good, I'm like, oh, that guy might win MVP. And I've found over the years that almost never happens. Like, I mean, I can't. Yeah, I think the only one that I could think of off the top of my head that went to a new team and immediately won MVP was Peyton Manning. Like right when he went to the Broncos, immediately won MVP. And I cannot think of another one off the top of my head. I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to scream at me. It was some 49ers player in 1978 or something. I don't know. But
look, I don't know off the top of my head when Bond's first MVP was, but.
Oh, yeah. Barry Bonds with the Giants. That's right. Yeah. He won MVP in Pittsburgh. I know that. Did he win MVP in 97 or 98 when he went to the Giants? I can't remember.
I know he won, 7 of them?
something like that.
I don't know when his
7, yeah,
first with the Giants was, but that'd be the only guy off the top of my head. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
Fair play. That probably would have been the guy that people would have been screaming at me. He's Barry, but you talked about him 18 times, and come on, dude, like, But that's fair. So yeah, Barry Bonds another one. But all right, this, and I know I said that I definitely wanted to pick your brain about the predictions, but I want to transition to talking about Johnson. And I know that you and I we played together. It was only a year, but obviously, baseball players, whether you play for a year, whether you play for 10, it's a shared struggle. We all know the ups and the downs of every season, but there's been something that I've been wanting to ask you for a long time, and I don't believe I've ever asked you on camera before. I think we may have talked about it off camera at some point, but the last game that I ever saw you play, you were out there for over 200 pitches.
Yeah.
And I know that there's baseball people out there right now going, what? Like, who let somebody go out there and throw 200 pitches? I promise at the time, viewers that that obviously weren't there, it made sense. And I cannot explain, like, I wouldn't be able to tell you why it was a good idea or why it at least made sense. Maybe you could say objectively may not be the best idea to have somebody pitch for that long, but it made sense. That's the point at the time. But I have to know, obviously you're saying yes whenever the coach is asking you, whenever Coach Fair is saying, hey, are you good to go back out there? Are you good to go back out there? Are you good to go back? Like, you're saying yes, but is there anything in the back of your mind that's sitting there going, this is probably not the best idea at this point for my body to keep going back out there and pitching that much? Because I mean, 100 pitches is a lot. I've thrown 149 pitches in a game. Dude, I was about ready to collapse. Like 200 is a whole nother beast.
Yeah. God, that was 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
That's
We're old, dude.
I know. The crazy thing is that like that day, that game replays in my head over and over again. Coach came and pulled me, gave me my walk with 2 outs in the ninth. We lost, but I don't know. Like that question makes so much sense. Of like, did you ever think about saying no, go to the pen, or saying no? And the answer is no. And it's not even as a competitor of like wanting to be the guy that won or lost, like wanting the ball in your hand. Because some people want the ball in their hand and some people don't. I do feel like pitching, like I wanted fate in my own hands. It was an elimination game, conference semifinal, I believe, quarter semi, whatever it was. But you get to a point when you play baseball and you know, hey, this is it. Whether it's retirement and pro guys, which like if you have like a 10, 20-year career, shit, like great, that's awesome. But like college, you kind of know, hey, I'm going to play next level ball or I'm not. And I knew that I wasn't. I was graduating, I was getting a degree, I was going to go work. And it was like, why would I, unless I physically can't, why am I saying no? Close ball game, two-run game, something like that. So it's not like I was just like hanging us out to dry. I was competing every inning. It wasn't just like it was getting worse and worse and worse. It was a close ball game until the final out was made. But yeah, no, I never. Going back, I don't think I would say no. Now playing Sandlot and pickup ball today, my shoulder reminds me of that game every single day. But no, man, I couldn't imagine saying no, and I don't think anybody would either.
I agree, and I was hoping you would talk about that, and I didn't want to phrase the question in a way of like, do you regret going out there or anything like that? Because I know I wouldn't, I know you wouldn't, I don't think anybody would, like you said. But for me, I think it's an interesting deep dive into like the psychology of a person, where because look, you went out on your sword, and I think for any athlete, especially in baseball, that's the only way you ever want to go. Is you never want it to be taken away from you from something else. You never want to be riding the pine on your last day. You want to go out on your sword. And for me, my shoulder was so bad that Coach Bruce allowed me to pitch the last inning of my college career. He gave me that, but you can ask anybody that was there. Ask Andy Riley if you ever talked to him. Ask Levi Keltz, who was catching my bullpen. I think the first warm-up pitch I threw was about 30 feet. Like my arm was literally, I couldn't throw a baseball, dude. By the time that was over, I had my shoulder was completely gone. But Bruce knew at that point, he was like, if Tyler's sitting the bench and his career's over, he's not going to be okay. And so I'm grateful that I at least got to go out there and embarrass myself, surely in front of, however many people were there. But I think, I always would joke in high school with all my teammates and even early on in college, like, dude, I'm going to ride this until my arm falls off. And I'm proud to say that in my final speech, when we were all done that year, I got to look my guys in the eye and say, fellas, I quite literally rode this until my arm fell off. Yeah. I have nothing left. If I throw another pitch, my arm's going to fly off like a boomerang. Like, I got nothing. And so, like, I think that that's the only way you want to go out as an athlete and as a competitor is, look, if I'm going to get stabbed in the heart and be done, I'd rather die on my own sword than have something be taken away from me like that. So I completely agree with you there. But yeah, it's just watching that because again, I was a freshman, I wasn't playing, like, as just a spectator and knowing what it felt like to throw 60% of what you threw. Mm-hmm. I was like, frick, dude, like, I can't imagine the soreness, the pain, the fatigue. And plus, on top of all that, the emotions of this might be it for me. This might be the last time I ever touch a baseball in a not a professional setting, but in a organized competitive setting like college baseball is. Like, I cannot imagine that strain on you, man. Like, I literally think about that game about once a week still.
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird to say, oh, like, you're living in the glory days, but I think about it often. I just think about, like, it's some of the most fun I've ever had. It's some of the, like, as far apart as we've gotten, or as close as me and some of the guys still are, like, that team was just, I miss them. Like, as much or as little as we talk, like, they're brothers. You guys are brothers. I love to, especially you, keep up with stuff that you've done and other guys. But it's like you get to a point, and it's one of the reasons why I think baseball or sports in general are romantic, but baseball is romantic, where you feel when you're done. Like, there's something comes over you and you kind of feel, and for whatever reason, like, towards the end of that game, it was like, oh, it hit me then. It's like, oh, if we lose here, it's it. Or, like, even if you win, you're not throwing the next game. And then it's like, it's in somebody else's hands to play the next game. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this could very well be the last game. And it's, you never want to look back. And this is exactly what you said. You left it all, and you told your guys that you left it all. You can't, you would never look back and say, ooh, I could have done one more. And you gave it all. It's like, I feel like, if looking back 6 years, we lost that game. Had I have come out in the fifth inning, and we win, great. Then we're talking about something different, but we still lose, or we lose the next game, or whatever it is. It's like, I left something in the tank that would eat at me every day, more than the loss eats at me. Coach Fair came out and he pulled me, and I do think it was a respect thing. If you let me go 190, 200 pitches, you're going to let me get that last out. I do think it was a shake my hand, like, well done kind of deal. And I'm forever indebted to Coach Fair for so many different things, but that especially for giving me that walk off. Not that I deserved it, not that I'm like this big anything, but I just really respected the way that he cared for his players, and that was caring for me. But he looked me in the eyes. He said, Max, and I was crouched down. I was like looking around in the dirt, looking around, because I knew that was it. And he said, Max, stand up, look at me. He said, you poured your heart, your blood, your sweat, your tears for this team for 4 years. And I could not be more proud of you. And that was it. And it wasn't about the game. It wasn't about, like, hey, you did the best you could. It was, for 4 years, you've put everything you can to help this ball club and this program grow and this team win. And it was like, okay, if there's any way to feel okay being done, because you would say the same thing. If you could suit up tomorrow and compete like we used to, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But if there's any consolation, it was that moment where Coach Fair said those things to me, and then I got to walk off the field. And it was sweet.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, for me, and I get emotional thinking about it, so I apologize for that. And I know you do too. But for me, my shoulder, the way it was, when it happens at the time, you sit there and think like, why is this happening? Why, I've worked so hard to get here, and I know that you had graduated by that time, but freshman year into sophomore year, I had worked myself to the bone to get my headspace right, to get my body right, just to have a chance. Because after freshman year, I thought that was it. I didn't think anybody would want. I didn't think that my coaches would want me to be on the team. I didn't think that I would have any spot. I thought my baseball career was over, but I wanted to give it one more real hard chance. And I felt like I built myself up to where when junior year rolled around, I could be a starter. I could actually be a factor, and we might be able to win this thing. And then my shoulder just, that was it. My shoulder had quit. And up to that point, my whole life I'd battled like, what am I going to do when I can't do this? Baseball is the only thing I've ever known since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do anything else. I don't want to do anything else. I don't think I'm good at anything else at that time. Like obviously now, there different avenues have opened up with announcing and this podcast, and now my job that I have in the football world. Like there's all these different things that I'm doing that, like, yes, like this is all good and good for me. But at the time, I'm like, I'm never going to be happy unless I'm doing this. Like, I don't know what to do. But there was a peace that came over me when I re-injured my shoulder, and my doctor looked at me in the eye and said, dude, like, you did not do this to yourself, but I don't know if I can bring you back.
Yeah.
Like, this is just a freak thing where your body basically just had enough. The PT was getting to me, and my shoulder had fused incorrectly to where my body had said, you're not throwing it. Like, you can't. We were able to figure it out to where I could throw like 68 miles an hour, but I mean, that it's pathetic. I mean, it's bad, but at that point I was done. My career was over. It was just basically like, can I muster up enough strength to do something and finish my career not doing nothing, not in sweatpants, basically. But there was a piece when he said that, and you'd think like that's like the worst feeling you could ever have in your life. And depending on the circumstances, it is. I know obviously Colt Williams blowing out his arm in the middle of a game, never being able to pitch again. Like I'd be heartbroken if that had ever happened to me, and I was heartbroken for him when it happened. But for me, like when it happened, I was like, okay, I don't have a choice now. Yeah. That choice, that element of what if I had kept playing, what if this, gone, because I can't anymore. There is no what if. The only what if is what if I hadn't blown out my arm, and that's a much different conversation than I'm healthy right now and I could still throw a little bit. What if I'd have kept playing? Could I have gone somewhere? There's none of that anymore. So I think very, very, very similar to what you were saying is like, if there's any way to be okay with your career being over, then sorry, I don't know what happened. My screen just did a whole weird thing, Max. I don't know what's going on. I think Zoom's kicking us out, Max. We've been having too much fun around here. But anyway, yeah. But if there's any way to be okay with what happened, then that would have been it.
It's the clarity. It's the clarity knowing, one, in your case, like physically you cannot, not like, do you want to pursue this thing more or continue this thing? It's the clarity of, hey, I cannot. And two, it's like, I'm not choosing to walk away because it got too hard or because I didn't want to work at it anymore. It's like, I left everything I could on the field. It's like, well done. I've done the best I can. You give it your best at whatever you do in life, like jobs, sports, podcast, like whatever it is, if you can look back and say, I did my best, that's it.
Yeah, you'll be able to sleep at night. You'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and know that you are okay. And I think the biggest thing is like knowing 100% that no matter what would have happened had I not injured my arm, like the thing that I always look back on is, and again, I don't like harping on high school, but this is when these things happen. Like I went to a school where it was kindergarten through 12th grade. And so when you're on the baseball team, when you're in high school, there's little kids that come to your game that go to the school that watch you and know who you are. And when you're walking through hallways in the middle school and in the elementary school trying to find teachers or trying to do something else, and these kids see you, like they run up to you because they think they don't know the difference between high school baseball and college baseball at that point. They're 4 or they're 5 or they're 6. They think you are like those guys they're seeing on TV. And I always would preach, like, no matter what happens, just don't give up. Always give everything you have. And if you leave something out there, there's always that thought in your mind, like, oh man, if those kids could see me at this point, they'd be so disappointed. I know those kids, and same for you, if you had that scenario, and I know that you were really close with Coach Fair and his kids as well. So like if you ever told them that or anybody else that, you'd be like, well, I mean, the writing's on the wall right there. Like you never gave up, you never stopped, you left everything you had until the wheels fell off or until your time was up, and that was it. So I think that, to me, that's the most important thing is when you have to tell people something, when you have to say, hey, like, if you want to listen to me, this is what you're going to have to do. And then you go out and you're actually able to do it, whether you're successful or not. Whether, it's just about sticking to your laurels. That's the most important thing for me that I think about, that kind of brings me that peace.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think you said it best.
Well, Max, I'm fresh out. I'm fresh out of questions for you, man. I'll tell you what, I don't like using superlatives, but I think this might be my favorite interview that I've done. I've had an absolute blast for this podcast, man. I think I'm going to have to get you back on just because this has just been so much fun. And I know that you've been wanting to come on, and it's been really my fault that you haven't, because I know that if I text you at any point, you're going to answer me back and you're going to hop on. It's just been me being crazy busy, having a lot of content to put out. And I just have not gotten back in the swing of interviews and stuff like that for this, but I'm going to get back into it. But dude, thank you so much for coming on. This has just been such a blast.
Lebsy, it's been so much fun. It's always fun. I will always say yes. And I will not let it go unsaid. I've said it before. I don't know if whatever reason your shoulder got hurt, you didn't continue to play baseball. However it is, a part of me is grateful because you're doing what I think is the best thing for you to do. And when I think of somebody who should be announcing games or hosting podcasts or whatever it is, Tyler Lopes is the first one that comes to mind. And I hope you know that and feel that.
I do, and I appreciate that. Well, I mean, I don't feel that about myself, but I feel you feeling that. So I appreciate that. And certainly that is definitely a blessing for all of that. But Max, thank you so much again. We'll do this again pretty soon. But I hope you have a great rest of your night again. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Awesome, brother. We'll talk soon. Love you, dude.
I love you too, man.
Hey guys, me again. I just want to say thank you so much for checking out the Lopes Goes Last podcast. It means the world to me that you decided to stick all the way to the end. That's super cool. So thank you again. And if you really, really like what you see, I'd love for you to subscribe, like the video, and share it with all your family and friends, because, this is my passion project. This is what I love to do, and I really want the sucker to grow. And the only way that can happen is through you guys, is if you guys can help me out. So again, if you like what you saw, please subscribe, like the video, share with all your friends and family. That's the only way this is going to grow. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.